Oh, oh God, where am I? We know your game now, Mr. Democracy Officer. We know you've been hiding the truth about Super Earth from us. The only truth to know is managed democracy. Shut up with your lies. I know you're hiding the truth about the bugs. I know you're hiding the truth about the bots. We need to know everything right now. All right, fine. Just don't hurt me. You're gonna need a notebook. This is gonna take a while. Welcome to the complete guide to the Helldivers universe. Today on deck, we have everything you ever wanted about the bots, the bugs, the Illuminate, Super Earth itself, and it all comes to you with a hefty helping of treason. And this video has been a colossal undertaking on my part. Some of the clips I use here today were filmed almost 6 months ago back in March of this year. And if you enjoyed this video, I'd love if you hit that like button down below and consider subscribing to the channel to stay tuned for more, because I arguably spent a little bit too much of my life making every part of this video. And without further ado, let's get into it. Grandfather, I'm not tired yet. Could you tell me a Super Earth approved bedtime story? Why, of course, little Jimmy. Did you want to hear about the Automatons again? Yes, Grandfather. Please tell me about the Automatons. To tell you the story of the Automatons, we have to go way back before my time even. This was a bedtime story my father used to tell me. We need to go back about 200 years ago, to when Super Earth was looking for better and more efficient ways to conquer the galaxy. They were run out of metal, they were building too many big statues, too many spaceships, and we need to find more planets that are full of metal. Skull Admiral, sir, we found a planet that's made entirely of metal to fund our conquest of the galaxy. Great work, Cadet. What's the name of this planet? We're calling it Cyberstan, for no specific reason of any robots that might appear in the future. Well, this can't possibly have any bad outcomes for us in the future or have any horrible foreshadowing. Great work, Cadet. I'm gonna promote you to Super Duper Extra Cadet. Cyberstan is a downright frigid, inhospitable world. And actually a fun fact here. If you go into Helldivers 2 and scroll up to the top of the map, you'll find the Valdis sector. And if you go into that Valdis sector, you'll find Cyberstan right in the middle. But that's enough modern day. Once the Super Earth government discovered Cyberstan, they sent colonists there to set up camp immediately and start mining operations. You know, if you really look out at the land here and ignore the freezing temperatures, this is quite a beautiful planet. Shut up, Jerry. We've got mining to do. Let's level this place. Mining day in and day out for Super Earth is real tiring business, but it's even more tiring when you're on a planet that's incredibly cold and just wants you to leave. We don't know exactly when it started or who it was started by, but the citizens of Cyberstan started experimenting with medical implants to help them get their work done faster and better and to survive the cold environment. Oh boy, do I love carrying boxes for the Super Earth government. Oh, God, a rock. Oh, my legs. Oh, I don't know how long I can keep doing this. Whoa, Jerry, where did you come from and what are you even saying? Oh, sorry, I forgot you don't know that language yet. I was just mining like you, but then I broke my legs, and they gave me these new robot legs, and oh my God, they're so much better. You gotta try out the robot legs. Well, you know, if I had robot legs, I could carry a lot more ore for Super Earth. You know, I might give these robot legs a try. Jerry, where'd you get the robot leg? Well, when I broke my leg, they sent me this creepy dude in a cave over there, and he just gave me new legs, and you gotta go see him. I think his name was Dave. Oh, okay. He seems like a nice guy. I guess I'll go talk to Dave. The residents of Cyberstan continued with these medical enhancements to help their daily lives until eventually they started to become more machine than man, and this led to some problems. It led to the residents questioning, hey, why are we doing this for Super Earth? We could be mining all these materials and using them for ourselves to make more robot legs and stuff. Also, by the way, what if we adopted space communism as a religion here? Being that these humans here on Cyberstan were no longer really human, they were more machine than man, they decided to call themselves the Cyborgs. And this is actually an enemy type you fight in Helldivers 1, which if you see here, they're mostly machine, but you can definitely see parts of them there that are still human-ish. And this is in contrast to our current automatons that look like complete robots. I say look like because we're going to get some interesting stuff later in this video. They might not be fully mechanical. There's a good chance they have some human parts still in them. Now, the Super Earth government, hearing all this happening, people are replacing their legs with robot legs. They've switched to super space communism. None of that's happening under their control. They're sending Helldivers in. They're figuring the situation out. So, to oversimplify the story of the first Helldivers real quick, the humans were able to push back the cyborgs, they contained them to their planet, and they disarmed them. And after they disarmed them, they took over all the factories, all the mines. Super Earth has that directly in control now, and they're going to re-educate them about how space communism was wrong. Now, being that the Super Earth government could never make a mistake, they are a managed democracy that is just beautiful. There's no errors here, and oh God, they've gotten mad that we kept them subjugated, and they've made complete robots to fight us. Oh no. Now, there's no direct information confirming it, but you have two options here. Either the cyborgs went fully autonomous and became basically all robot, or the cyborgs made these robots in order to fight back humanity. Now, the first thing we're looking at here that supports the latter option, that these robots were made to fight humanity and are not the cyborgs evolved themselves, are actually the logos you see for both of them. Now, if you take a look here at the logo of the Cyborgs from Helldivers 1, you see a red star that's broken into 4 parts. And that red might be space communism now that we think about it. It absolutely is. It's related to space communism. But let's take a shift over here to Helldivers 2 and look at the logo for the Automatons. It's shifted to black in coloring. So, why the change in the color scheme here, and why the gear that was added around the outer edge? I think if the Cyborgs just upgraded themselves to the point of being fully mechanical, they would have kept their same original red star symbolism. But if they were making a new tool that they wanted to use to help fight off the Helldivers, maybe they would give it some new color schemes, symbolism, so it's something that's fighting along with them and is not them themselves. And also, why the change from red to black? I think that may be due to the shift that in the Cyborgs, they originally, had blood because they're still fairly human, and moving over to now that the lifeblood of the Automatons is oil. And the black there is oil, the red was blood before, not just communism, also blood. Man, I feel like an English teacher now. But that is not all. There is one more thing that proves it even further. We have one singular tweet from 2021 from the Helldivers 1 Twitter of all places. So 3 years ago, they already think about automatons here. Helldivers 1 put out this message completely in binary, which someone was able to transfer into the message we'll see on screen now. We, the collective from Cyberstan, unanimously assert our independence from Super Earth. We have the right to defend our home from the brainwashed Helldivers. Our children, the Automatons, will not suffer as we have under the oppression of Super Earth. So other than this just being treasonous garbage against the government of Super Earth here, this gives us some interesting info. That means that the automatons were directly made by the cyborgs as a weapon to fight Helldivers, which explains a lot of their anatomy. It explains why guys have got chainsaw arms, why things are just loaded down with guns. These were built to fight. And the cyborgs' original plan was they wanted to design these automatons in order to push towards Super Earth, take over, and wipe out the threat of humanity ever taking over Cyberstan again. Now, that isn't how the current timeline is going into the game. In the current timeline, Super Earth is pushing the automatons back, they've got them contained to one sector, but what will happen? Will they be able to wipe them out? Nobody knows. And that brings us to modern day on the lore. So now it's time to move on to the next half of this video. Is he asleep? I think I can leave. Grandfather, tell me more about the robots. Oh god, okay. Of course, Jimmy, I'll tell you more about the robots. Alright, now that we've gone through the lore, it's time to break down the automatons themselves. Let's take a look at them and see how they're made. Because I hinted at something earlier that they might not be fully robotic, and let's dig into that here. We have our first robot up on the list, the Trooper. It's the basic guy. They come with a few loadouts, they get a basic gun, sometimes they have swords, sometimes they jump at you, very scary. But if you look at him, it looks very humanoid. It's 2 legs, 2 arms, got a head. And why would the cyborgs build a robot that's humanoid? Well, because they are still humanoid as well, so they want to build something in their image. Or could it be a little more than just they want to build something in their image? Something I hinted at earlier, that these robots might not be fully mechanical, we're going to dig into a little bit here. So, in playing Helldivers 2, when you're fighting the bots and you're going around a bot planet, you'll notice, cages with human prisoners in them. Why do robots have any reason to take human prisoners? Well, you also notice at some of these camps they have a lot of bits of people laying around. They've kind of torn them apart a little. Very nasty. I'm going to blur that here because YouTube will not like me showing that. But why would they be doing this? If you look even closer, it seems like they want the brains. Of course the evil robots want the brains. But there's a reason for this. I don't think the automatons are just doing this to scare people. They could, but why would robots have need to try to instill fear, or why would that even be programmed into them? I think instead, the robots here are trying to harvest the most powerful computer that humanity has ever developed, the human brain. I'm gonna say it now, and I've seen this other places online too. I think that the automatons, every single one, are controlled by a human brain. And there's some evidence for that I'm going to dig into quick. Automatons, when they're patrolling on the map, if you don't alert them, you can hear them chanting. Now, why would a fully mechanical species of space robots need to chant? Chanting in a normal military is done to keep pace, keep people motivated, and as a team-building activity. Robots don't need to do that. They communicate through Wi-Fi or however the hell they do it. But might they still be chanting as a little leftover bit from the human brain that's in there? Another piece of evidence is one of the tooltips you can get when you're loading into an automaton match is that the robots are affected by suppressive fire. Now, why would a species of fully mechanical space robots be affected by suppressive fire? That wouldn't be programmed in by their creators. You want them to be perfect all the time. I think that's a leftover instinct from the human brain that's in there. They hear the loud sounds, bright flashes, and they want to hide. Robots wouldn't do that. The human brain, yes. This would also explain why the basic guys, and even the more advanced guys, all have 2 arms and 2 legs. To work off that instinct of just walking and using your arms normally, they would want the robots designed like this. If you built like a little car, the brain wouldn't have to do with a little car, so they've got legs and arms. I don't want to say this is definitive proof, but being that they're stealing people and how they react, I think that the robots are not mechanical and there is a human brain somewhere in there. And I don't like that. That scares me. That makes me even more scared of the automatons. Moving on to the next robot on our list here, we've got the Commissar, who again supports the idea that these are actually controlled by human brains, because the Commissar acts as a leader for the bots, calls in bot drops, kind of commands around the robots, and why would the robots need a leader if they just had a perfect algorithm that was controlling them? They wouldn't. So, more evidence there's brains in there. But the Commissar, very nasty because of that bot drop. Take this one out first if you can. And next up on our list, we're going to look at the Scout Strider, which I think shows some evidence here that when the Cyborgs were making the automatons, it was a development process. They didn't have just all of them planned out from the start, and they're like, yep, we're going to throw them all out there. Why would you have a robot controlling a walking gun when later on we see something like the Hulk, which is literally just a walking pile of guns? I think that first they made the automatons to all be people-sized and generally people-based. So they had to build something for them to control, like the walker here. And the walker would also be simple for them to integrate with the existing automatons they're building, because they don't need to make the brain they're using in their controls with the funky things. It's just a normal robot, and then it walks around in this weird little leggy vehicle. It's got a gun on the front, so fairly easy to build and control. So this is probably like the next step off of stuff. The Berserker here is an interesting specimen, because the Berserker has chainsaw hands, which one, on top of being far cooler than Edward Scissorhands, because chainsaw better than scissors, is proof here that the Cyborgs were designing these robots here purely for war. They wanted to build these to fight off the Helldivers. What is this guy gonna do on Cybertron, or Cyberstan, or whatever it's called? Is he gonna mine? No, it's a mining planet. Chainsaws aren't good for mining. This here is built to fight off the Helldivers completely. So that proves, even more so, that the Cyborgs were trying to design weapons of war to fight the Helldivers when they made the automatons. Looking here at our next automaton, we've got the Devastator, who comes in a couple of varieties. You've got the rocket variety, which is absolutely horrible to deal with. I tell you what, I think they're the bot that kills me the most, the stupid rocket devastators. Because they've got decent armor to them, and they throw rockets at you. But the basic guy we're looking at here right now, no rockets, just heavily armored. I think when the Cyborgs were looking at these, they thought, okay, we're gonna need something that can withstand a few shots, because those Helldivers, man, they got guns, and we don't like that. So we're gonna need something that can take a hit or two. Look at this guy. This is the scariest automaton I've ever seen. The Hulk. I swear, these things are worse than the tanks. I thought the tanks would be off when they dropped in. No. Dealing with the Hulks is worse because they can move faster, they can spin around and aim faster. Honestly, they're harder to take out than the tanks. But I want to take a moment to talk about the devs here, not the lore. I love how much this is based off the Warhammer 40k Dreadnoughts. The look is the same, the feel is the same, but it's definitely unique too. I love that. Chef's kiss. Perfect design there. Which, speaking of design, when the Cyborgs designing these guys, the same principle applies. The Helldivers here are starting to make things like vehicles and tanks. In Helldivers 1, you did get to use vehicles and tanks, so they're going to need something that can withstand those tanks. And hey, the Hulk here, ton of armor, still walks around like a dude. There's probably, I'm going to guess, a standard robot dude packed into the center there, much like they do in the Warhammer 40k Dreadnoughts. So, probably opens up, get dude in there. It's technically a vehicle, not a person. Which, speaking of vehicles, we've got our first automaton vehicle to look at here, the tank. Now, the tank here, I think, operates much like a real-world tank. It's got a main gun, it's got a little side gun down the front here. I bet you there is 3 basic automatons in here controlling this thing. You've got a driver, because it can move independently of the turret. So then you've got a gunner who's controlling the turret, and you've got an extra gunner who's controlling this little side turret. The last automaton vehicle we've got to talk about is the dropship. And this here is the logistics base of the automatons. The commissars call it that flare, which calls in these. And these drop off new enemies. It can even drop off whole tanks. So this thing is wild. It can carry a lot of weight, but it's awesome for bringing bots around. Because you'll see normally, they're pretty slow. They don't run that fast. They need something to move them. And the automatons, I'm assuming, thinking like Super Earth here, if they've got a technology, they're going to turn it into a weapon somehow. And oh ho ho, they have. The dropships recently have started appearing as gunships, and they spawn from little factories on the map and then plague you forever. They're awful, I hate them. But they're an awesome piece of technology to use against Super Earth, so I can see why the Cyborgs developed them. I actually don't have any good image to show you of them because they always have this blaring red light in the front, so you really can't see them, but you can kind of pick out here. It's got the similar 4 engines to the dropship, so this is definitely just a modified dropship they threw some guns on. And it works. It works really well. This is awesome at stopping the Helldivers. But if you thought the airship was the worst the Automatons had to offer, oh no, they've got something bigger. The Factory Strider. It's got guns on top, it's got guns on its head, and it drops automatons straight out of its belly onto the battlefield because it is a mobile factory. Now this thing is a menace to take down, and it's a fearsome force on the battlefield. But why do the automatons feel like they needed a mobile factory? Well, they probably adapted because Super Earth is getting pretty darn good at taking out those stationary factories. Airstrikes does the trick. A simple grenade blows them up. You think a simple grenade's blowing this thing up? No way. They needed reinforced factories, and this was the way they were going to do it. And this also would help them if they want to advance on Super Earth positions, because you gotta build a factory on the ground, it takes a while. If the factory walks up to them and starts dumping bots out the bottom, a little bit quicker. Grandfather, I think there might be an automaton under my bed. Shut up, Jimmy. No, there isn't. Sir, I have great news. We've finally beaten back the Cyborgs. Great work, soldier. Let's make sure we keep those Cyborgs under lock and key from now on. But sir, don't you think keeping the Cyborgs subjugated will lead to further resentment and plotting against the Super Earth government? Subja, what did you just say? I don't understand a lot of the words you just said to me, son. You better follow my orders. Okay, sir. Subjugating the Cyborgs. I don't think this will have any possible future repercussions. 100 years later. Ah, crap. The kid was right. The consequences of my action have come to haunt me. Have you ever wondered where the Automatons in Helldivers 2 come from? They certainly share a lot of similarities with the Cyborgs from Helldivers 1, but how exactly did we get from the Cyborgs of Helldivers 1 to the Automatons of Helldivers 2? And that is exactly what we're going to explore today. I'm going to take a look at how some of the enemies from Helldivers 1 have morphed and evolved to become the Automatons we see today, and what happened to some of the Helldivers 1 enemies that we don't see anymore in the game. For this breakdown, let's start out with the super basic dude from Helldivers 1, the Initiate. The Initiate here was the super basic, easy to defeat enemy from Helldivers 1. They were meant to come at you en masse and just try to overwhelm you. They were very easy to take down because they had very little armor, and they were lightly armed with just one gun and one knife that someone duct taped to their hand. Now, you may be thinking this looks like just a regular dude and not really robotic at all. Like, duct taping a knife to someone's hand is not really a cyborg. And you'd be right, because it was very common for the cyborgs to capture and indoctrinate Super Earth citizens and turn them into these really basic fighting machine initiates. The cyborgs didn't need high fighting skill of these initiates. They just needed mass to soak up bullets from Super Earth. And man, that sure sounds a lot like the Trooper from Helldivers 2. The Trooper here is functionally the same. It's just a dude walking around with a gun, and instead of a knife duct taped to his arm, he's just got a metal fist that hurts just as much. And the Automatons use these Troopers in the exact same way as the Initiates. They just have them come at you en masse and hope to overwhelm you, while some of them get taken out, and that's okay. Now, you may be thinking, hold on there, Nate. The Troopers in Helldivers 2 have all sorts of variants. You're telling me there's just one Initiate? Oh, no, don't worry. The Initiate had variants in Helldivers 1, too. And those variants are as follows. You had the Immolator, the Comrade, the Berserker, the Butcher, the Hound, and the Grotesque. But before we talk about these variants, I think it's important that we talk about how the Initiate became the Trooper. And that's going to get into how the Cyborgs transitioned into the Automatons. Now, I've previously done a video on the lore of the Automatons and how they are today, but I haven't covered as much how the Cyborgs became the Automatons. Now, what we know from the history books of Super Earth, which should probably be taken with a grain of salt, is that after the events of Helldivers 1, the Cyborgs were beaten back to Cyberstan and forced back into work there. And the Cyborgs, after seeing how well their first revolution went, getting their butts kicked and put back on Cyberstan, they realized, we gotta do something else if we're gonna try to break free from Super Earth here. As we go through the bigger and more elite enemies from Helldivers 1 here, you'll see that the Cyborgs had a culture of the more elite and the more special people were more robotic. And this is kind of along the lines of how the Adeptus Mechanicus are in Warhammer, actually. The ideal way to be is to be almost entirely mechanical. So I suspect that while the Cyborgs were subjugated to work on Cyberstan, they started to tinker. They started to find ways to become truly, fully mechanical, other than their brains. And this is something they could likely petition to their Super Earth governors on the planet that, oh, well, if we make this guy fully robotic, he doesn't need to eat, he doesn't need to sleep, he can just keep working. This is going to be perfect for increasing productivity. And said governors would be like, oh yeah, that makes sense. More money for Super Earth, perfect. And those Super Earth governors were completely overlooking that the Cyborgs were building an even more efficient fighting machine. And that is how we got from the Initiates of Helldivers 1 up to the Trooper. They worked and tinkered until they finally perfected the way to just stick a human brain into a robotic body and make it work. Which leads to some of the scenes we see around the battlefield now. All sorts of, chopped up people bits because the Automatons are trying to harvest brains in order to put into new bodies and make these really basic soldiers. These captured brains obviously aren't thinking, man, I love the Automatons, I want to help them out. So they need to keep them as the basic soldiers in order to just make them do simple tasks like walk forward, shoot. They can't have them do more complicated tasks that would require more thinking. Now, with that covered on how the first Automatons came to be, allegedly, per my, very extensive research, let's talk about these variants of the Initiate. Our first variant of the Initiate that we have here doesn't exactly have a comparison in Helldivers 2. It is the Immolator, and this here was just a dude with a flamethrower. Now, there is an enemy in Helldivers 2 that has a flamethrower, and that is the Hulk, but I can't say it's a direct comparison because that's a massive walking armored box, and this is just a dude. And also, to jump ahead a little bit, there was a Hulk in Helldivers 1 as well. So this here, they didn't seem to keep the flamethrower on the basic guys yet. I suspect sometime in the future, the Automatons may start rolling out these flamethrower basic dudes because, hey, fire's good. But as it stands right now, we don't have a counterpart in Helldivers 2 for the Immolator here. And interestingly enough, these Immolators were never really just walking around the planet on patrols for you to take out. They were only called in by squad leader soldiers who saw maybe a large enough group of Helldivers that they thought, man, we need some fire to deal with this. Which leads well into the next enemy we want to talk about here, the squad leader soldier themselves. The squad leader, well, had a giant cannon on its arm that could shoot grenades at you, as well as shoot up the alarm flares to call in more cyborgs. And this is where we see an interesting discrepancy between the cyborgs and the automatons. In Helldivers 1, only these squad leaders could call in reinforcements, not the basic initiates or anything. Whereas in Helldivers 2, any basic trooper can call in reinforcements. The cyborgs in Helldivers 1 were still fairly human, and they only really trusted the leaders to be calling in these reinforcements properly. Whereas in Helldivers 2, it seems that they've perfected programming just the basic troopers to raise the alarm whenever they see anything, and then to appropriately call in the amount of force they need to deal with the problem. Now, just because all the basic troopers can call in reinforcements doesn't mean that the squad leader cyborg from Helldivers 1 does not have a counterpart in Helldivers 2. We have the Commissar in the Automaton army. And the Commissar acts almost exactly like the squad leader. Their main goal is to immediately when they see an enemy, call in reinforcements. Now, the Commissar is a little bit different than the squad leader as they are not as heavily armed. Instead of the big grenade launcher, the Commissar here only gets a little pistol, so they're not as much of a threat themselves, but the fact that they call in reinforcements immediately is a huge threat. You need to take these out very quickly. And since I don't really have a good segue to move on to the next enemy, let's talk about the Comrade that was in Helldivers 1. The Comrade was more or less a beefed up initiate. Instead of getting a little gun, they got a giant cannon on their arm. Instead of having a little knife taped to their arm, they had their entire arm replaced with a giant sword. Now, the ranks of the Automatons in Helldivers 2 don't exactly have a comparison to this guy here, but I think that's because when the Cyborgs were building the Automatons, they decided to specialize more. This guy here kind of didn't make sense. He's got a big cannon, which leads to believe he should be further back, but he's also got a big sword, which makes you think he should be running in for close combat. So I think they decided to split this guy up into essentially the Rocket Trooper and the Raider that runs at you with two swords. This specialization into two separate enemy types here made them more efficient. Like, it doesn't make sense to be long range and close combat. Like, either way, you're not using one of your arms properly. Whereas the Rocket Trooper can stay in the back and just launch rockets at things, and the Raider can just fly in and go stabbing. This shows that the Cyborgs were putting aside their urge to make themselves individually the best they can be and the most mechanical, and instead making the most efficient fighting machines they could. Which, speaking of close combat, let's move on to our next cyborg that always was meant for close combat, the Berserker, which you'll notice shares a name with an automaton, the Berserker. The Berserker here remains basically unchanged throughout the two games, other than the Berserker in Helldivers 1 being, having a normal torso in the middle that's a little horrifying, and now the Berserker in Helldivers 2 being fully mechanical. Both of them would just run at you with melee weapons and just try to hack you to pieces. And they both, too, quite terrifyingly might I note, could take quite a beating, and they could eat up some good damage before they go down, making them a very dangerous foe to fight in both games. Now, our next Helldivers 1 enemy, the Butcher here, is a very interesting one, not only because of its comparisons to the Automatons, but because of the lore itself in Helldivers 1. the Butcher was the one that actually did all the modifying and augmenting of all the rest of the cyborgs. This is the guy that was slapping on metal arms. This is, if you watched my previous video, Dave the Leg Wizard. And this guy was a beast to take down because he's just a big chunk of flesh, quite terrifyingly, which it's not all metal going on there. This guy's just scary to look at, which also means that the Butcher was probably working in some biological modification and not just metal modification, because there's no way this guy got that big just, by hanging out. Now, while this Butcher here doesn't exactly have a counterpart in Helldivers 2, because, they don't need to do modification anymore, everything's made in a factory, I think the Devastator is a pretty close one as far as how they fight on the battlefield here. The Devastator is big, chunky, has a lot of armor, is tough to take down. And the standard one is pretty similar, where it's just got a basic gun and a fist to punch it with. Now, the Butcher didn't have any guns, and he had just both melee weapons, but I think, as they were building up the Automatons, they're like, it's probably a good idea we give this thing some sort of ranged weapon. Even if it's not the main focus, it better have something. Now, I mentioned that the Butcher obviously was working with, biological modification as well as mechanical modification to the cyborgs here, because he's covered in all sorts of weird fleshy bits. Which leads well into a Helldivers 1 enemy that does not have a counterpart and probably never will, the Grotesque. And these guys are, what's the word I'm looking for here? What are they to look at there? Oh, they're grotesque to look at because they're horrifying flesh abominations that, as lore says, are fallen initiates that were too wounded to heal up normally, so they just melded them into these weird creatures that would just run at the enemy and know nothing else other than slap with my claws. Now, since the Automatons have gone basically fully mechanical, I doubt we'll be seeing creatures like this in Helldivers 2. These things are a relic of the past, and the Automatons are not dealing with them. And moving on to an enemy that also doesn't have a counterpart in Helldivers 2, but I think may get one eventually, is the Hound, which is more or less a robotically enhanced doggo. Which, if you played Helldivers 1, you remember these guys, because they were a pain to deal with. They didn't take much damage to take out, but if you weren't paying attention, they were incredibly fast, and they would run at you and just knock you down and take you out almost immediately. Now, of course, in their war against Super Earth, the cyborgs just had to go and turn dogs into violent machines of death. But why don't we see that in the Automatons? The Automatons don't just readily have pets laying around. They don't need pets. They don't take care of pets. They're fully robotic. And that means there just wasn't any around to turn into automatons, so they didn't bother. But it would be interesting to see if they decided to add back in an enemy like this for the automatons, because right now, a lot of the automatons are pretty slow. Making one that was really fast and would run at you on all fours and was like a truly robotic dog would be very interesting to fight. Now, that covers all the basic infantry from the cyborgs, but that doesn't quite cover all the basic infantry from the automatons. Most of them had counterparts, like the Brawler and the Rocket Raider were a split of the Comrade and whatnot, but there's one here we didn't really talk about, the Assault Trooper, because the Assault Trooper gets a jetpack. Now, I think the cyborgs developed this Assault Trooper with a jetpack because they were phasing out the Hounds. They didn't want to deal with dogs anymore. They're just going to make a normal guy and slap a jetpack on him so we can go flying at the enemy and get real close. Because not only can this thing get up real close from melee real quick, like the Hound could, they gave this guy a gun, so he can shoot you when he's really close too. And there's one more interesting enemy that you could kind of call it a trooper in the Automatons army, the Scout Strider, because this is just a trooper that's standing on a walker that's got a gun on it. And I'm sure the cyborgs saw the walkers that the Helldivers used in Helldivers 1 and decided, hey, we want something like that for ourselves. So they built a very simple one because they couldn't get the really complex machines the Helldivers are building, and they just put 2 legs and a gun on it and made it a lot simpler. But worry not, or maybe more accurately, worry a ton, because these things probably live in your nightmares like they do mine, because the Automatons did eventually build the Hulk, which looks a whole lot like the Helldivers walkers. But there was a Hulk in the Cyborgs army as well. And it almost reminds me more of the shield devastators that we have in the Automatons now, because this was just a big dude carrying a shield and a minigun. But what's the reasoning for this little name switcheroo? Why is the Hulk from the Cyborgs much more similar to the shield devastators that we have now? That's actually because in the Cyborg army, there was an even stronger enemy that honestly looks more like our modern day Hulks in the Automatons army, the Warlord. Just taking a look at this Warlord here, you can see the resemblance to the Automatons Hulks. It's fully armored. It only has one real weak point, its head right there. It's got a heavy cannon. It's got a big arm. This thing was a monster to deal with, which sounds a whole lot like our modern day Hulks, which are heavily armored, a pain to deal with, and they only really have one good weak point. But again, what's the reason for this name switching? Why is the Warlord we're looking at here much similar to the Automatons' Hulk? And then why is the Hulk from the Cyborgs much similar to the Devastator? I think that's because as the Cyborgs were building these automatons, they wanted to improve. They wanted to leave room for improvement. So they're saving this Warlord class of enemy for something even more devastating than the Hulk that we see today. Now, you could argue this even tougher class of enemy they were saving the name Warlord for is actually the Factory Strider we see today, because it's large, it's heavily armored, and it's got some good firepower on it. But as Helldivers, we see it and go, wow, that thing creates other bots. That's a Factory Strider. And maybe the Cyborgs meant that to be a Warlord. But let's talk about that Factory Strider for a moment here while we're on the topic. Why would the Cyborgs design something like this? Well, currently, as you notice very well in the game, the stationary factories, very easy to blow up, very easy to take down. A heavily armored walking factory, much harder to take out, and it can fight back. And they were probably thinking, we need to design something that can take the fight to the enemies, the Helldivers, of course. And this is the best way to do it, because if we need reinforcements, we can make them right there. But let's take a moment to talk about heavy vehicles, because I'm sure you're all familiar with the Automaton's tank. It's heavily armored, it's a pain to deal with, it's a big boy. But the Cyborgs had something similar. They had the infantry fighting vehicle, which, well, it does look like the tank, is not a tank, because as the name implies, this thing carried infantry. It would just dump grotesques out the back of it to come fight you. Now, why is it the Cyborgs have moved towards a fully dedicated tank rather than this infantry fighting vehicle that could drop off infantry? Well, that's because the Automatons managed to develop the dropship, which can drop off infantry. So they no longer need this land vehicle to bring reinforcements because they've got an air vehicle that can drop off robots right on top of your noggin. There's no reason to bother taking up space in their tanks with infantry when they can just drop them off in the air. They might as well just put more firepower on this thing. So they've moved to just fully fledged tanks. So with that, we've covered pretty much every cyborg that has a counterpart in Helldivers 2 and does not. Except for the big one. The monster. The raid boss. The huge boy. It was the siege mech. The cyborgs had a siege mech that was absolutely covered in guns, super heavily armored, and was literally a raid boss for you to fight. This thing got a health bar. I don't think you could argue that Factory Striders took the place of these siege mechs, because Factory Striders have one gun on them. The siege mechs were loaded with weapons to take down Helldivers. The Factory Striders clearly to make things, the siege mech is meant to destroy things. But why don't the Automatons have a massive enemy like this? It'd be very good against the Helldivers. I think it's for a very similar reason that the Terminids do not have their Hive Lord, which you haven't seen my video on how the Helldivers 1 bugs became the Helldivers 2 Terminids. You should totally go check it out after watching this one. But they don't have it because of actual development reasons and not lore reasons yet. I suspect that eventually Arrowhead Studios is going to add these really specific missions for raid bosses, where the only point of the mission is to fight this giant enemy. It's going to be an extreme difficulty. It's going to be incredibly hard to do. You're going to have to fight it in multiple places around the map, take out a third of its health, fight through some bots to get to its next location, take out another third. But it hasn't been added yet because they're still working on them. Grandfather, how did the Terminids and the humans come to be at war with each other perpetually? Well, that's a fine question there, Jimmy. Gather round, kids, and it's time to break down the history of the Terminids and the humans and what happened between them. Oh boy, do I love story time with Grandfather. Well, you see, children, it all started millions upon millions of years ago when a mommy dinosaur loved a daddy Grandfather, we know about the dinosaurs already. Oh, sorry, Jimmy. What was I telling you about again? Oh, there. Oh, the Terminids, right, the Terminids. Back when I was just a wee lad and I could talk like a normal man, the humans, they began expanding into space. And what was the first thing they did? Of course, they looked for new and profitable worlds to visit, and what did they find? A large species of relatively sentient bugs. At first, the humans were reasonable, and they did try diplomacy, and they tried to work out some nice relationships with the bugs. But soon, very soon, the humans realized, hey, those bugs have element 710 in them. Which, by the way, if you flip element 710 over, it literally just says oil. So, of course, the human explorers looked at them and thought, hey, why are we talking to the bugs when we could just squeeze them and get oil? So, like any reasonably enterprising explorer would think when they're traveling in their galaxy, they thought, all right, so if we're going to be setting up humans on these new planets here, what if we made those humans work for our benefit? And we brought in the Terminids and kept them in nice enclosed containers here, and then just squeezed them a lot, and it's got all the oil out of them. Now, if you've ever seen any movie like Planet of the Apes or anything like that, you must be thinking right now, there's no possible way this can go wrong. Keeping these creatures in captivity has no flaws, they'll never escape, they'll be fantastic. Oh no, they've escaped. Yeah, of course they escaped. The bugs escaped, they started procreating on the planets they were on, and taking over and wiping everyone out. So what's the only reasonable human response here? Since this is the super Earth government of our incredibly beautiful managed democracy, could they ever possibly say, oh no, we've had a containment breach, we need to send people in to clean up this containment breach and make sure these bugs don't spread? No. That'd be a PR nightmare. Instead, what Super Earth decided to do is they're like, we should say the Terminids are invading and we need to wipe them out. This couldn't have possibly been our fault. Nothing we did could have caused this. We need to send in the Helldivers. And now that is how an originally peaceful race of the Terminids, who actually initially did not have any quarrel with the humans, wound up trying to violently wipe them off their planets, because the humans brought them over, took advantage of them, and the bugs are like, I don't like that. I think we're going to stop that, and we're going to take over their planets now. And now we have eternal conflict between the Terminids and the humans. Grandfather, tell me about the different bugs. I want to know about the different kinds of bugs. Grandfather, tell me now. Of course, little Jimmy. Do you really think I would leave out the fun and gory details of all the bugs I fought in the Terminid-Human Wars? Let me just get my super whiteboard of managed democracy. Now, this may be a little treasonous here for me to tell you the secrets of the bugs, and managed democracy may not want you to know it, but you know what? It's important if you're going to kill the bugs yourself. There's a theory here about the bugs that I want to share. Now, looking at our first bug here, we have the smallest ones, the scavengers. The orange one does not spew toxic venom at you, but if there's a swarm of them, they can still take you down if you're not paying any attention. And the green variety, found in a little bit higher level missions, does spew venom at you, which doesn't do much damage, but does slow you down. That can be an issue. Now, if you're sitting there thinking, oh god, is this guy just gonna go through the bugs? I know what the bugs are. I've played the damn game. Hold your horses. I actually have a theory here that I am gonna jump right into. And I have to give credit where credit's due, because this is not my theory alone. I was scrolling Twitter one day, and I saw here from Helldivers Alerts that could the bugs be evolutions of each other? These are not separate species of bugs. They are all the same species of bug, but they're just in different stages of evolution. And I want to break down how true that could probably be. For starters, let's sit down and look at the scavenger here. Looking at the scavenger, what's some important body features we see here? 4 legs, right? It's got 3 joints in each spot here. One there, one there, one there. And we've also got 2 little arm mandible things here, we'll call them. And we've also got a very big thorax here. Remember all those features. We'll be looking at them again later. Let's step up the ladder and size the bug a little bit here. The warrior, the next largest bug, not too much a threat, can't really take you down too easily, but they'll get you if you're not paying attention. What do we see? 4 legs, bigger, 2 mandibles, much larger and sharper, but still 2 front mandible things here. Same 3 joints. This is looking like the same bug to me, just a little larger. This one here does not spew any venom at you, so likely the orange variety. And now, sit down and think about that orange versus green variety here. Is that possible? This could be a male versus female bug thing here? I think possibly. Now, which one's male, which one's female? I'm going to say it blindly here, but I do have reasoning and evidence to back it up later. I'm going to say the orange one here is probably male, and the green one is probably female. Now, climbing our way up the size ladder of bugs again here, we've got the Brood Commander, who is much more aggressive, much more of a threat to you. We've also got 4 legs, 3 joints in each leg, 2 front claws. This looks like a bigger version of the warrior, if you ask me, so I'm just going to say it's an older version of the warrior. It's possibly won some fights against other bugs in its species. It's got seniority. Other bugs listen to this bug. They follow this bug. That's why this one's in charge. It's the oldest, most senior bug of the group. Now, shifting gears away from the Brood Commander a little, but still likely on the male side of the bugs here, we've got the Hive Guard. It's the one with the big armored face, and you shoot at it and all the bullets bounce off. Very annoying. But I tell you what, this is probably an evolution of the warrior that changed up its anatomy to be able to defend the hive from, I don't know, say attackers, humans, other predators, anything. Looking here at everyone's absolutely favorite bug to run into when there's 15 of them spawning, and then you're running with an SSD, you need to get to the mission checkpoint, and then more keep spawning in front of you, and I'm off track here. The Charger. The Charger here is big and heavily armored. But doesn't this armor look pretty similar to the Hive Guard, just, you know, much more armored? I would say this is just an older version of the Hive Guard. This is just a real crusty, angry old Hive Guard. But now that we've gone down the trail of large bugs on what I'm calling the male side of the bugs here, let's go back a moment here. So we had the warrior, and we also have the hunter. The hunter looks a little different. It seems to have a lot lighter armor, still got the 4 legs, still got the 2 mandibles, but it's sprouted little wings. Now, why do I think this is? I think this is still the same species of bug, but it is adapted to hunt food for their broods here. Look at it. It's got wings, it can jump faster. You all know it can jump faster and further because they always jump at me. And I swear, they just hunt me down until I run out of stims and I'm done. That's just it. I don't like the hunters. Okay, anyways, but that's not the point here. This bug here might excel at going out and yoinking other bugs from other broods, or maybe back in the day when they weren't ruling the planet, catching other prey animals that were out in the wilds. But then, let's go up a little bit here. The Stalker looks like exactly a bigger version of the Hunter. And if we think about that for a second, there's Stalker lairs. So that probably means maybe these bugs go off on their own, they collect a bunch of food, store them in these lairs, and then bring them back to the whole brood. That's quite possible. And let's take a look at that biology again. Got 4 legs here, same 3 joints, it's got some real vicious claws on it, and the wings are bigger. And interestingly enough, it's developed the ability to cloak itself. And let's think about that cloaking for a minute, because that's very interesting. I would say early on in a bug society, when there was other prey animals around they wanted to catch, this cloaking would be fantastic. They wouldn't see you coming. But how could that cloaking be useful when all of the bugs have taken over and it's a purely bug culture planet? Well, you know, for current militaries, we have the Special Forces that are good at sneaking in, taking care of business, and never being seen. The Stalker bug here, if it were to sneak into, say, another brood of bugs, take out that brood commander because it's cloaked, get out unseen, that would be a fantastic ability for a tribe of bugs to get on top of the other. So that's pretty much all the bugs that are orange, and I'm assuming here male, based on some of my conclusions. Let's move on to the green bugs that I'm assuming are female here, and I'll tell you why. So, looking here at the biosphere, let's take a look at that biology quick here. We've got 4 legs, no noticeable front claws here, which makes me think, it's probably not really meant for fighting. But what could this large thorax be here, and why does it spit so much gunk at you? These bugs could be fantastic at defending a nest. And what would they be defending them from? Back in the early stages of bug culture, maybe other predators on their planet that wanted to come in and steal their eggs. Now in modern day, humans, automatons, anything. That corrosive bile is going to take out anything. Now, moving up to our largest bug on the list here, the Bile Titan. Why do I specifically think the green ones are female? There's a couple reasons here. If we look at many types of bugs on Earth, like the praying mantis, the females actually tend to be bigger. And then this is the largest bug we have around. Not a coincidence, I'm thinking. But one more final piece of evidence why I think the Bile Titan is the largest of the female bugs here. If you're doing a Destroy the Eggs mission, take a look around. How did those eggs get up so high on the mountain? Could these bugs have climbed? Maybe? They don't look terribly built for climbing though, considering the spiky legs. More likely than not, this really tall Bile Titan evolved to be tall so it could lay eggs up higher. If you lay the eggs up higher, less predators can get to them. So this absolutely massive bug here is probably able to lay those eggs up high, whereas none of these other ones could. And considering that the Bile Titan still likes to spit corrosive goo on everything in sight, this would also be fantastic at defending the nest that it's laid. And since this is the largest bug, we can assume this might be like the queens of their society. Now, I suspect the Bile Titan is not actually the biggest bug in the galaxy here. And this is pure conjecture and hypothesis, but I think these bugs may operate similar to the Terminids of 40K universe, which, we sit here and look at that name for a minute. Terminids. They couldn't have possibly had any inspiration for the bug's name. Don't think so at all. That's not related, can't be. But the Terminids in the 40K universe work off a very large bug hive mind. And I suspect here the Terminids have a similar feature, and that's how they coordinate so well. How else would they be able to call in patrols so easily and call in more bugs to take you out? Where's the threat? Something's got to let the other bugs know. And we know the little bugs put out pheromones. We can see them putting out pheromones when they're calling in other bugs. But again, with my hypothesis here, that hive mind can pick up on those pheromones, and then based on the pheromones themselves, they can determine what kind of response is needed. I'm going to assume those little bugs put some information in those pheromones, whatever, to say, hey, we have this kind of danger, we need this kind of response. And then the hive mind can dispatch some bugs, which would explain the different difficulty levels. If the bugs think it's a low-level threat, they're only going to send a few little ones. If they think it's a really high-level threat, like a Helldive difficulty mission, they're going to send a lot of bugs to deal with the threat. So you're telling me you think it's a good idea for me to inject these sentient bugs that you captured from deep space with all sorts of wild chemicals that'll mutate them? Yep. And the only reason we're doing this is so that they produce more element 710? Yep. And you don't think that anything could possibly go wrong with this plan? Nope. Alright, works for me. Let's do it. I have become death, creator of roided up bugs. So recently, one of my fantastic viewers left an awesome idea for a video that I think you all will enjoy, so I'm going to take a look at it here. We're going to take a look at the Helldivers 1 bugs versus the Helldivers 2 bugs today. So from little tidbits in lore, we know that during the First Galactic War, humanity found out that they could get element 710 from these bugs they were fighting. And they said, hey, what if we genetically modified those and farmed them to get even more element 710? Which is exactly what they did. Which led to, the massively oversized creatures we fight today in Helldivers 2 that broke free from all the farms. Now, in classic Helldivers dev fashion, they've revealed very little lore about where the Helldivers 1 bugs came from. And pretty much all we do know is that they are a sentient species of bugs that's evolved over millions of years, and if you squeeze them, they turn into spaceship fuel. Humanity ran into these bugs during their first galactic war of expansion, and at first it was peaceful, but by at first I mean, maybe half an hour or so before they realized that bug's got oil in it. Quick, squeeze it. So that didn't last long, and it turned into a giant fight, because these bugs, as I said, are sentient, so they realized, hey, that's a threat to our society. We gotta take down those humans, which they did not. They lost. Humans put them in farms and mutated them a little bit. So moving on now, let's look at some of the smaller bugs first. There is not as many bugs in Helldivers 1 as there is in Helldivers 2, so some of the bugs in Helldivers 2 aren't going to have direct comparisons, and actually, some of the bugs from Helldivers 1 we have not seen added yet. So there's not going to be 100% carryover here, but we'll work through the ones that we can, and I'll discuss some of my thoughts on the ones that don't have carryover later. Now, the first Helldivers 1 bug we're going to talk about is the Scout, whose name implies a lot. These are the small bugs. They're meant to do basic work tasks and whatnot, nothing crazy. And in battle, they're meant to go around, identify threats, and call in the bigger bugs where they're needed. Helldivers 2 does have a direct comparison to this, the Scavenger. And if we take a look at them side by side, just looking at physical appearances even, they look fairly similar. You can tell how these two are mutated from each other. The Scout here has got 6 legs, so does the Scavenger. The Scout's got some longer antennae though and whatnot, and the Scavenger's a lot bulkier. This is probably some of the effects of the mutation for getting element 710. The Scavenger is a bit bulkier and rounder and would, be great for squeezing oil out of, whereas the Scout is a lot lankier and probably wouldn't produce as much oil. But the Scavenger is 100% a mutation of the Scout here because they serve the same purpose when we're fighting them. They call in bug breaches so they get the bigger bugs into the fight, but they themselves are pretty weak. Looking at our next lighter bug from Helldivers 1, we've got the Vanguard, who looks a whole lot like the Scout, except just a little bigger, maybe a little bigger claws on it, and it looks like it has some wings, which is very interesting if we move over to our Helldivers 2 counterpart. I'm suspecting that after this one was mutated, we got the Pouncer. You see those same kind of orangish wings on this guy, the same 6 legs, but again, kind of compressed down, a little bit bulkier, good for squeezing oil out of still, because it's a small bug. It's not going to be a huge ordeal to squeeze this bug. These two are definitely mutations of each other. Now, even if you've never played Helldivers 1, I think you're going to recognize this next bug because they actually share a name. The Stalker. You know the Stalker from Helldivers 2. It goes invisible, it just runs at you and absolutely destroys you. I hate them. I just hate them. Helldivers 1 had them as well, and they did essentially the same thing. And the Helldivers 1 Stalker did still have the ability to cloak. It was certainly not as good as the Stalker in Helldivers 2, which is nearly invisible. The Helldivers 1 Stalker you could see reasonably well. But what's interesting here is, why did that cloaking ability get better with the mutations? Humanity certainly couldn't have wanted that, because, an invisible bug's hard to squeeze into oil. But what if they were trying to figure out their own cloaking technology, so they're experimenting with these bugs? They said, hey, you know what, if we can make a bug go invisible, maybe we can use that for ourselves. Now, I think it's quite apparent that humanity's experiment here did not go well because humanity has no sort of cloaking technology that they use, and the bugs are nearly invisible in Terra's part of the battlefield, so I'm gonna call that a failed experiment there. Thanks, Super Earth. Thanks for the invisible bugs to fight. Now, our next bug here from Helldivers 1 is a real interesting one because it doesn't exactly have a counterpart in Helldivers 2. It's related to the Stalker, and it's called the Shadow. The Shadow here had the same cloaking abilities, and it could even regenerate health much better than the Stalkers. But not only that, it had the Scout's ability to call in other bugs to its position. So this thing was essentially a combination of the Stalker and the Scout, and that has not been seen yet in Helldivers 2. And man, I hope they don't add it because that would be awful to deal with. And moving on to some larger bugs, we have another one that shares a name with the Helldivers 2 bug. In Helldivers 1, we had the Warrior, which, while it shares a name, they do not look that similar. This Warrior here was a lot bulkier and had a big claw on it, a tiny claw, kind of like lobsters do. Whereas the Warrior in Helldivers 2 has two real sharp claws on them on the front, and it doesn't look the exact same. Other than the 6 legs carrying over, these look quite different and mutated. Now, why on earth would humanity mutate something that was originally kind of chunky and, probably good for squeezing oil out of, into the current Warrior that's a lot more spindly and probably doesn't have as much juice in it? I'm not sure on that one. I suspect maybe the original Helldivers 1 Warrior here is a lot of that chunk was actually just armor that wasn't real good for squeezing bug oil out of, whereas the Warrior now is much less armored and easier to take down, so that was probably better for putting in the oil squeezers. And these two bugs, before and after mutation, serve essentially the same purpose. They're the little bit bigger Warrior bugs that's meant to go take down threats here. They can smack things around a lot. And the previous Warrior in Helldivers 1 could take a bit more damage because of that armor than our Helldivers 2 Warrior, but more or less, they're the same bug. And our next Helldivers 1 bug is an interesting one. It's called the Elite, which based on the name you think might match up more with the Brood Commander in Helldivers 2, but it sure does not look like it. Honestly, what it looks more like is the Hive Guard. So the Elite in Helldivers 1 had a lot thicker armor, more durability, but it was essentially just a Warrior. So this thing was just a harder to take down Warrior. And the Hive Guard is essentially a harder to take down Warrior with, heavy armor on the front. So I think these two are mutations of each other. I don't quite know how they mutated from the Elite, which just looks like a heavy Warrior in Helldivers 1, to the Hive Guard that's got like a totally different setup, funky armor plates only in the front, and the Elite originally had armor all over the place. Now, I can't see why humanity would want to mutate these Elites into the Hive Guards where they just have a highly armored face. The only thing I can think is, much like the Warriors, they were trying to get rid of some of that armor, so they usually just squeeze, and they were only able to get rid of the armor on the back half of the bug, and they were like, you know what, that's good enough. We can just squeeze the back half and toss the front. Oh well. Next up on the list of bugs from Helldivers 1, we got something that just recently had a counterpart added to Helldivers 2, the Impaler. The Impaler is a pretty intense bug. It would shoot its tentacles into the ground and come smack around the battlefield and try to take you out. And the only way to really take it out was, well, it had its tentacles in the ground to shoot at its face, where it was exposing the little tentacle-y bits. Now, there's not a ton of great footage of the Impaler yet because it just got added to the game, and by that I mean I played a bunch of missions, couldn't get to spawn and got annoyed, so here's an image. So they look almost identical. You got the same 3 tentacles, heavily armored bug, and it looks like from the trailer that once it puts its tentacles in the ground, it unveils its weak face. So it'll probably be the same way to take it down, hit it with some big rockets. But the question is, have these mutated? I'm gonna go with yes, because they sure look a whole lot bigger in the trailer for Helldivers 2 than they ever did in the game of Helldivers 1. Now, why would Super Earth want to make these Impalers bigger? You think that would just be more of a threat to the people working with them and more of a threat to like the facilities they're keeping them in. And there's a good chance these Impalers might be why some of them broke out. Maybe the Impalers, dug some holes under walls and whatnot. But I think humanity was trying to make the Impalers bigger, not to squeeze for oil. Otherwise, they'd try to get rid of the armor like the other ones. No. These here, I think they wanted to use them as mining bugs. I think they said, ooh, they can throw their tentacles straight into the ground. We could probably, if we could control them, dig up some ore with those guys. And humanity did try. They made them bigger, but they never found a way to control them. So now you just have giant bugs that shoot tentacles into the ground. Quite scary if you ask me. And speaking of heavy armor, moving down the list here, in Helldivers 1 we had the tank, which sure looks a whole lot like the Charger. And it acted exactly like it. It would just charge straight at you, it was super heavily armored in the front, and the only real good way to take it out was in the back. Obviously in Helldivers 2, now you can take it out from the front. If you have some anti-tank weapons, you can weaken up some of the armor in the front. But man, this is like the exact same bug. Now our next bug here is one that has another direct name counterpart in Helldivers 2. The Behemoth, which if you're playing Helldivers 2, and honestly I did not know this for a long time, you may not even realize that there's a Charger and a Behemoth, because in Helldivers 2, they look pretty darn similar. The Behemoth here in Helldivers 2, if you take a look at it compared to the Charger, has a much more aggressive face on it, but otherwise looks almost identical. But this is real interesting, because the Behemoth in Helldivers 2 has a weak point in the back, and the Behemoth in Helldivers 1 did not. The Behemoth in Helldivers 1 was fully armored all around, and you needed anti-tank weapons to take it out. Normal rifle? No, do no damage to it. So, why is it that humanity mutated these to have that weak point? Well, obviously, there's a whole bunch of good, juicy bug oil in these bugs, and they want to squeeze them somehow. So, fully armored is not very good for that, and much like some of the previous bugs we saw that got a little less armored before, they made a weak point of the Behemoth, so they could get that delicious oil out of it. Now, we're kind of exhausting our list of bugs from Helldivers 1 here, but we've got a couple interesting ones left. We have another one with a direct name in Helldivers 2, the Brood Commander. The Brood Commander, obviously, is a giant bug that is meant to be incredibly aggressive and lead all the other bugs. Serve the same purpose in Helldivers 1 as it does in Helldivers 2. And honestly, kind of looks like from before we were saying the Warrior. Sure looks pretty similar, just kind of mutated to be a little more spindly and easier to take out if need be. The Brood Commander before looks real heavily armored, and had a lot of dangly bits we didn't need when squeezing for oil. The Brood Commander now, less heavily armored, much better for squeezing. Now, our last bug on the list does not have a counterpart in Helldivers 2, and we can't even begin to fathom what it would be like in Helldivers 2, because we have the big bad bug of Helldivers 1, the monstrosity to deal with, the raid boss, essentially. It was the Hive Lord. The Hive Lord here was actually meant like a raid boss, and a health bar showed up on the top. We don't have this in Helldivers 2 yet, but I suspect they may add it, as I'll get into. And these Hive Lords in Helldivers 1 were massive. They're massive burrowing bugs that would pop out of the ground. You'd have to fight literally just the top half of them as they're trying to devour you. I suspect humans could not capture these things, and even if they tried, they would just burrow back underground. So they just left them as is because they're far too dangerous to deal with, and there was no way they were going to contain these. But I do think they'll be back in Helldivers 2 eventually. Not because they broke free from somewhere, but because we're going to get to a planet that one of them lives on. And it's going to be a mission like the destroy the Bile Titans, destroy the Chargers, and it's going to be like destroy the Hive Lord. It's going to be like difficulty 11 or something. And this thing is going to be literally a raid boss to fight. In Helldivers 1, it even had a health bar. I suspect we're going to get back to that eventually here, and this is going to be an insanely hard fight. More likely than not, it's going to be a mission where, like, you do a third of its health at one location, and then it's going to burrow and go somewhere else on the map, and you're going to have to fight your way over to it to fight it again. And then you're going to take it out, but then it's going to come back because it burrows up again, and then finally you'll kill it. This thing's going to be a monstrosity in Helldivers 2, but man, I think it'll be fun to deal with eventually. So, we've exhausted our list of Helldivers 1 bugs, and there are some bugs left in Helldivers 2 that I have not discussed, so we're going to get into those now. One big one here is the spewers. You've got the nursing spewer, the bile spewer. There's no real counterpart to these in Helldivers 1, and they are just big, squishy bugs. I suspect this was like the peak of oil production for humanity. Look how juicy that bug looks. You squeeze that thing, there's tons of oil in there. So this is like the peak mutation of the little tiny scavengers and whatnot for oil production. Now, one interesting and incredibly painful to deal with bug that we have to deal with in Helldivers 2 that was not a problem in Helldivers 1 is the Shrieker. There wasn't even any flying bugs in Helldivers 1, interestingly enough. So where did the Shrieker come from? I suspect more likely than not, in the mutation process, a hunter just grew giant wings and these things started appearing and they could actually fly, not just kind of jump and fly like grasshoppers do. And that's where we got the Shrieker from. And our last bug in Helldivers 2 is a monster. It's a menace. It's the Bile Titan. There was nothing like this in Helldivers 1. It's super tall, it's heavily armored, and it just spits goo at you that melts your everything. But where did the Bile Titan come from? If I had to guess, in the mutation process of making the nursing spewers, the bile spewers, and whatnot, humanity may have said, oh man, these are great for getting oil. What if we made them even bigger? We could get even more oil. And they, messed up and actually made a heavily armored monstrosity because, much like the bile spewer, this thing shoots goo at you that melts your everything, but it's just so heavily armored. So I think the Bile Titan is like a second stage mutation process. They already made the bile spewer and they're like, what if we went further? We could get more oil. And they made the Bile Titan. They absolutely messed up on that one there because now we have to deal with those giant Bile Titans walking around the battlefield. Grandfather, I have another question for you. Jimmy, what did I tell you about interrupting Grandfather while he's watching funny videos on YouTube.com? But what's your question? Who are the Illuminate?
No, God! No, God, please, no! No!
Jimmy, never ask an old man about the Illuminate. It brings up very bad memories. But since you're my grandson, I'll tell you. Oh, goody, story time with Grandfather again. The Illuminate are far older than me, if you can believe it. Actually, they're far older than humanity itself. Some say they were the first intelligent civilization to emerge in the universe. Some even say that many of the UFO sightings throughout human history were actually the Illuminate coming to see how we were progressing. Bridge, I'm seeing something weird up here.
What is it, Lightning 2? Do you require backup?
I don't think so. It looks like some blue dude riding a hoverboard at nearly Mach 2.
Lightning 2, please investigate as closely as you deem safe.
Oh, wow. He just did a kickflip. I've seen all I need to see. He's chill as hell. It's said that the Illuminate were watching the humans because they saw the potential in their society, and as soon as they became a spacefaring species, they wanted to interact with them to help better the universe and work to create a better future for... You could guess about how well that went once they met the humans. Hello, human. We are the Illuminate. We have been keeping an eye on you for centuries, and we see the potential of your society. Hey, Jerry, get over here. There's some weird blue dude talking to me. Oh, that's all you needed to say. I know what we gotta do. We gotta hit him with a baseball bat. Wait, Jerry. What if they're friendly? You've been watching too many romance movies on the space TV. I'm gonna hit him with a baseball bat right now. Oh God, oh dear, oh omnipotent one, please stop hitting me with this bat of the baseball. This little incident with the baseball bat to the face of the Illuminate envoy is actually what started the First Galactic War and the events of Helldivers 1. Don't fact check me on that at all, please. Throughout the First Galactic War, the Helldivers fought a long and grueling campaign against a technologically advanced enemy in the Illuminate. But through sheer will and the power of managed democracy, humanity came out on top and was able to mostly disarm the Illuminate and push them back to their corner of the galaxy. Grandfather, this history lesson has been fascinating, but could you please explain in great detail all the different features of the Illuminate troopers? Jimmy, why are you always so specific with your questions? It's almost like someone is giving you a script to push me towards talking about specific plot points. Almost like someone is crafting every word we say. But yes, of course, Jimmy, I can. Grandfather, you're starting to scare me with all your weird fourth wall breaking. I think you need to go see a doctor. But yay, more Illuminate! So in Helldivers 1 of Illuminate, there's a couple common enemies you run into. The first one being the Apprentice. This is just your regular Joe Illuminate. For the Illuminate, I guess a regular, Joe. Ah! This one here generally resembles a human. 2 arms, 2 legs, and a big old staff they would run around and bonk you with. They just love to run up and clobber you with that staff, which... Is this actually just Wukong from League of Legends? No, that's stupid. But not only that, they also shot this spooky purple goo at you, which somehow slowed you down as you ran. Now, it states here that this purple goo, even though it comes out of thin air, is actually nanobots. That's right, even the basic Illuminate had the ability to control nanobots. They are that technologically advanced. And the other common enemy you run into was an absolute pain to deal with. Oh my god. The Sniper. It was the Sniper. If you played Helldivers 1, this thing lives in your nightmares, because were they that strong? No, you could shoot him pretty easily. But that sniper shot would kill you in one shot. And if you didn't play Helldivers 1, it actually had a mechanic where you would go down. You wouldn't just immediately turn into little bits like in Helldivers 2. You would go down and you could pick yourself up. Sniper, you get hit with that, nope, you're done. But the interesting thing about the snipers here, if you watch them while they're doing that little sniper thing, they don't have a gun. They're just kind of waving their hands and then suddenly magic flies out and then you're dead. But is this more nanobots? More likely than not. They're likely throwing a condensed swarm of nanobots straight at you just to blow you up. Very scary, but very technologically advanced if I do say so myself. And I guess since I gave the Illuminate Apprentice a name, I'm going to give this guy a name too. This is Jeffrey! But if you thought that these basic guys were the scouts for Illuminate, oh, are you wrong. They have something creepier. They have these weird little eyeball things that would float around and just stare at you. But they aren't just checking you out. They are a little bit. But they're actually calling in your location for reinforcements. They would make a little noise, pop up, and boom, reinforcements. On the easy difficulties, not terrible to deal with, an annoyance, but harder difficulties, buckle in, because there's a lot of things coming to get you. They're sending in the big guns. Oh, and I guess we'll need this eyeball. But those little eyeballs there could summon something far worse at higher difficulties. The Striders. This one here I'm gonna name Frank. This is a giant walking robot that would shoot lightning out of its nose like a cursed version of Dumbo. They walked slow, and they were tanky, but they were even tankier because they had shields. These shields worked pretty similar to our current Helldivers 2 shield backpack, except they could take quite a few more shots before they went down. One of these, not terrible to deal with. 5 of them coming out at once, this is quite a task to take out. And I mentioned earlier that the Illuminate had a hierarchical society based on deeds they've done, and you get rewarded with better technology. We're going to start working our way up that ladder here. Now we have the Illuminate Illusionist. I'm going to say this is an Illuminate who's proved them themselves. They show off the great deeds they've done. They've earned this technology. Because they get a giant floating chair, and they look like the people from WALL-E now. Now, they have the Wally chair, but these guys are far more terrifying than the residents of the Wally spaceship because they could instill an immense amount of fear in even the most seasoned Helldiver. Now, how did they do this? It's not explained at all, so I'm just going to say nanobots because nanobots are the answer to everything this episode, apparently. Because they would just hit you with a little beam or something, and then boom, your controls are reversed. That's right, they fear you into just walking the wrong direction. You want to go right, you're going left. Ooh, were you trying to type in a stratagem there? Ooh, good luck hitting the right keys. They're all reversed now. Oh, okay, you're going to try to shoot the Illuminate and just aim in that direction? Ha! Your aiming's reversed too. You might have just bonked your friend with a railgun round. Whoopsie! Oh, and did I mention they get shields too? So you can't aim at them properly, and they have a shield in case somebody is aiming at them properly. Absolutely horrifying. This is basically still the people from Wall-E in the floaty chair, except if you gave them a shield and ripped the turret off a tank and just let them hold it. Very horrifying to deal with. Wait, almost forgot the name for this one. It's Fneeblip. So now you just be sitting to yourself. Sitting to yourself? What the hell does that mean? So you must be sitting there thinking to yourself, well, that's got to be the worst one. This has got to be the worst Illuminate you had to deal with in Helldivers 1. Ha! You're wrong. There was something worse. Imagine the Illusionist, but if you gave it 19 Red Bulls and let it float around the battlefield. That's right, these were called the council members. This was the captain from the Wall-E ship. This here was awful, because they got all the same abilities as Illusionists, the confuse the controls, the shield, yada yada, all that. Except the council members, they stole the lightning attack from the Striders. And just to make it worse, they could teleport. That's right. If everything else goes exactly perfectly for you, you're aiming at them, you can actually shoot them, boop, they just teleport out of the way of your bullets. Truly horrifying to deal with. The absolute worst thing you could deal with from the This is not the worst thing you can deal with from the Illuminate. Oh, God. Wait, gotta name it. This one is named, the worst thing the Illuminate had. Their most dangerous weapon. It was devastating. The Illuminate Eye. And not the little one. They had a giant one. They had a giant one that would shoot lasers at you. This thing here was essentially meant to be a raid boss, either at the end of the mission or it was the whole mission for all of your teammates to fight. It just shot lasers all over the place. It had insane health. They actually gave it a health bar for you to look at. A health bar. That's how you know it has a lot of health. This thing here was the worst, and I hope we never see them again because, man, I don't want to have this broken line like Biotitans where there's like 10 of them. But this eyeball here needs a powerful name. We're going to give it a very powerful name. This eyeball is named Jessica. Grandfather, the Illuminate's not horrifying. They aren't going to come back to fight us, right? Well, Jimmy, I wish I could tell you the truth. Wait, I am telling you the truth. The Illuminate were beaten into submission 100 years ago, but they were not destroyed. They're still around. You mean they can come back? Yes, Jimmy. Yes, I do. But for your sake, I hope that they never do. Oh, that rhymed. Well, Grandpa Democracy, I have horrible news for you. There have been some game files that were dug up that are possible Illuminate coming up in the future for us, and they look horrifying. So if you want to roll into these fresh, you don't want to see spoilers for Illuminate, thanks for watching the video thus far. I'm okay if you click off. Don't check out these Illuminate, but if you want a treat, if you want to see the new Illuminate that are coming up, feel free to watch longer. And the second half of this video here, do I have a treat for you indeed? To go along with these leaked images, there is a phenomenally talented 3D render artist on Reddit that's been making some Helldivers content, and they took one look at these images and said, ooh, I got something for that. Iron Sights. Iron Sights here made some fantastic images I'm going to put up alongside, and you better go check out their content. I got links down below, so I better see you clicking on those. But please finish the video first. Go click on those at the end. All right, getting into it. So our first one I got up on the list here is going to look pretty darn similar to the Illusionist I mentioned earlier, because it looks almost exactly the same. It's got the floating chair, it's got the arms, it's just sitting there. I bet you this thing has a shield again. I bet you this thing still has the confusion powers, so get ready to, you know, get hit with a blast of, oops, I typed in the wrong stratagem. Sorry about that, boys. So next up, we've got a model here that doesn't really look like anything that was in Helldivers 1, so we'll have to kind of speculate what this is. Iron Sights here has made a beautiful render and said this is the Summoner. And I'm no expert, but I'm gonna take a wild guess and say the Summoner might summon things. What it'll summon? I don't know, probably weaker enemies or something. It'll probably be like the eyeballs and bring up enemies to come fight you. But this thing here will be interesting to deal with. I bet it's not gonna be all that tanky itself, but it's gonna have swarms of enemies around it. And taking a little speculation to how this guy might work in the Society of the Illuminate, you'll start seeing with these here that this Illuminate, they've gone kind of away from technology and more towards like their weird spiritual astral powers they have. They've got a lot more robes and fancy imagery. They have powers that even the nanobots can't explain, and they're just like doing weird magic and rituals. It seems like the Illuminate may have started worshiping some sort of god that is giving them these powers, and they're using their technology to now supplement those faith powers. Very interesting stuff going on here. And continuing on with that idea of they seem to be more faith-based now. This here is supposedly called the Elder. And look at those fancy robes. This thing does look like an Elder. It looks like it maybe kind of leads these rituals and ceremonies, and I'm gonna guess has some incredibly powerful magic powers that's going to shoot at you. So watch out for these. They might, I don't know, pick you up and throw you off a cliff or something, but they're gonna be strong. And moving in the completely different direction from the Elder here, we have got this guy, which we don't know much about, but man, it is horrifying to look at. Beautifully made, beautiful render, but this thing is horrifying. I don't know what this thing is gonna do, because I can't quite tell the scale on it. If I had to take a guess, I'm gonna say it's big. It feels big and mean, like Hulk or something. But there's a chance it could be small and like skitter at you. I think if it's big, it's probably gonna come out of the ground near you and try to smack you. If it's small, there's gonna be swarms of these things coming at you. Maybe the summoner summons up. They kind of seem like the Illuminate have started doing some sort of like body modification, maybe? Some kind of body horror stuff, and they're just piecing things together, putting tentacles and horns on things. I don't know, but this seems like an experiment gone wrong, and it is here to steal your legs, so keep an eye on those. Alright, here's one that's going to look very familiar to a Helldivers 1 enemy again. The floating eyeball that summons things. That's right, it's back. This was pretty straightforward. I guarantee it does the exact same feature. It stares at you, it summons enemies. Both other factions have something that summons more enemies. You've got the bot drops, the bug breaches. This thing here is going to summon an Illuminate conglomerate or something like that. I don't know what they'll call it. So to round out our list here, we've got something that's reminiscent of the Helldivers 1 enemy, the Strider. Looks pretty similar, it's got the 3 legs again, but looks far more horrifying and way bigger. The Helldivers 1 Strider felt like maybe, roughly twice the size of a human. It's not insane. This one here, no, this thing's Biotitan sized. It's gotta be. And considering the light up face, I'm gonna guess it gets the lightning attack back from Helldivers 1 that the Striders had, because you know what? We've got lightning guns. No enemy has shot lightning at us yet. This thing here, this definitely shoots lightning. And who knows, maybe it gets the shield again too. Hope not though, that would be awful. So after looking at all these new Illuminate, they feel much more grotesque than before, more tentacles hanging off them, scary things. They feel like Illuminate that have gotten desperate to fight back humanity. They used to be a nice clean civilization, they were all focused on tech, and now it seems like they've turned to worshipping maybe even a dark god, because a lot of these things seem kind of evil. They seem a little bit corrupted. Like if you just look at this walker again, it just looks so more tarnished than the original walkers from Helldivers 1. I think that these Illuminate here have looked for new powers, and they've gone to the dark side just to beat back humanity. And I guarantee, I don't know when we're getting it. I don't know when it's happening. Maybe it's tomorrow, maybe it's at the end of the year. The Illuminate are coming to Helldivers 2. They'll be here, and they will be terrifying to deal with, but also pretty fun to fight, let's be real. Hey Jerry, have you ever wondered why we're here? Why, for democracy, of course. No, of course I know that, but I mean, like, what historical events led us here? Well, we had the First Galactic War. No, but like before that, like way back. I guess the furthest back I know is the last Great War that brought us wonderful managed democracy. But like, why did that war happen? Something had to have happened before that. Frank, are you questioning the story of the Super Earth government? Because that's treason! Democracy officer! Oh god, please no, don't throw me in the airlock of managed democracy. Have you ever wondered how Super Earth became the galactic superpower that it is today? Or how managed democracy spread around the galaxy? Well, if you're thinking it's anything other than the approved story of the Super Earth government, you're committing treason right now. You should probably watch your back. But I'm also here to tell you, you're right if you're thinking it's not just the approved story. Today, we are covering the big one, the entire history of Super Earth and how we got to where we are today in the Second Galactic War. Now, this is going to be a lot of undemocratic, non-Super Earth approved nonsense, so buckle in. But to talk about Super Earth, we need to talk about normal Earth first, because Earth started out as a hot ball of magma. Actually, this is a little too far back. We're going to speed ahead. All you really need to know is Australia has weird animals, Julius Caesar was the leader of Rome, and the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. Alright, on to where Super Earth began. Now, Super Earth has restricted a lot of information on how it became what it is today. It was all because of something called the Last Great War, which was not a galactic war like the first or second galactic wars. It was contained solely to Earth. Now, we know very little about the Last Great War itself. All we really have from the Super Earth government is this map of Super Earth. Now, you'll notice a lot of similarities and differences from a map of normal Earth here. Similarities, the continents look the same. Differences, literally everything else. You'll notice that on this map, you have these dashed zones that are called the Last Great War Wasteland Zones, which sound like a horrible place to take a vacation to. You also have restricted areas where it looks like they're saving the last rainforest to remain, and you have megacities and sectors. Now, these sectors don't exactly split along traditional lines of where the continents were, so this is an interesting one here to dig into. And breaking down these 7 sectors we've got here, let's start out with Sector 1. Sector 1 contains Australia, Oceania, and Japan, and its megacity looks to be built on the Earth city of Singapore. Sector 2 contains China and a good part of Eastern Russia, and its megacity looks to be built on the city of Shanghai. You'll also notice in this area, the Great Wall has been renamed to the Great Wall of Democracy, so that's an interesting little addition there. For Sector 3, we've got a good part of Northern Europe as well as Western Russia. And you'll notice there is not Megacity 3. Sector 3 here has Prosperity City, which we'll get into why exactly that is not just Megacity 3 a little bit later. Sector 4 here contains Western and Southern Europe as well as the western half of Africa. And it does not contain England because England appears to have been destroyed. It's probably because they're eating beans on toast and stuff. I don't know what they're eating over there. But for Megacity 4, it looks to be built on the old city of Brussels. Now, Sector 5 contains Eastern Africa as well as a lot of the Middle East and India, and Megacity 5 looks to be built on Jerusalem. For Sector 6, we've got Southern and Central America, and their megacity looks to be built on modern-day Buenos Aires. For our final sector, we've got Sector 7, which contains most of North America, and its megacity is built on what looks to be New York. You'll also notice Yellowstone has been renamed to Superstone Park. But with that out of the way, let's sit back over to the interesting spot of Prosperity City in Sector 3. Why is this Prosperity City and not just Megacity 3? Well, more likely than not, this is the capital of Super Earth. Now, Prosperity City is built on modern-day Stockholm, which is in Sweden. And this may make you wonder, how did Sweden become the superpower of the world and take over the entire Earth? Well, we're gonna have to start digging into why we have these Last Great War Wasteland Zones. Now, we don't know when the Last Great War happened, we don't know why it happened, we don't know exactly who it was between, but we can take a guess here and say, more likely than not, at some point in normal history, the Cold War went hot. And when this Cold War went hot, the nukes started flying, England got destroyed because of their beans, it looks like somewhere in Eastern Europe got destroyed, and pretty much all of the Arctic got nuked. Now, why did they nuke the Arctic, you may ask? That's because they were taking out their true enemy. The polar bears. That's right. Polar bears were an enemy to managed democracy and had to be removed. The only way they could guarantee all the polar bears were gone? Nuke the entire Arctic. But in the middle of this was Sweden, between East and West. They were biding their time, letting the two great powers fight, and letting them take out the polar bears, their true enemy, because Sweden knew how to bring peace to Earth and take over Earth. Swedish meatballs and house music. If the polar bears were still around, would have eaten all the meatballs. Wouldn't have had any meatballs to have the party, and they could have a good party, you need house music. So Sweden took back over Super Earth with their great powers of meatball and house music. That's actually all I really know about Sweden, by the way. If you want to put some Sweden fun facts in the comments, that'd be highly appreciated. Thank you. But East and West, tired from this massive war that was killing millions, said, you know what? I could sit down for a plate of Swedish meatballs. And a nice dance party sounds pretty good. We'll stop this war and listen to you, Sweden. And during this meatball dinner, Sweden introduced an idea they had to help rule the world peacefully and freedomly. And that idea was the managed democracy that we have today. Managed democracy being the form of government that was going to help humanity expand into the stars. Managed democracy was going to be based around the idea that, you know, it's a lot of hassle to vote. What if instead we had a computer survey you could fill out, and that survey would take all your needs and wants and funnel those votes into the candidate that it thinks is best? And we know this quiz works perfectly because in the last Super Earth election, the president won with like 99% of the vote, so like clearly everyone wants him. Now, if this sounds a little fishy to you, that's because, yeah, that's not a democracy. That's just the ruling class picking who wins. No election wins by 99%. So yeah, the Super Earth is just ruled by a dictatorship, more or less. Which, if you want a less goofy reason on why Sweden is now the capital of the known galaxy, that's because Airhead Studios is based in Stockholm. So, of course, they're going to pick Stockholm as their capital city in, you know, Super Earth. So, now that we know where managed democracy comes from, there's a couple more things to cover on the map quick. There's the restricted areas. The restricted areas contain the last rainforest here, as well as an emergency seed vault. The last rainforests are likely heavily protected because, in the war against the polar bears, it had to happen, it had to be done, but those northern areas contained a lot of trees that were producing oxygen for Earth, and now they're all gone. So those rainforests are the last things helping keep Earth habitable. And our last restricted zone here is the emergency seed vault, which actually is a real place on normal Earth here. This is the location of the Svalbard seed vault, which contains all sorts of seeds from around the world in case, natural disasters or man-made disasters wipe out a whole species of plants. They can repopulate that area, and a lot of these are crops, so they can help feed humanity in case, something destroys all the corn. Well, they've got more corn up there that you can plant again and bring back the population of corn. Super Earth is likely keeping around the seed vault because, they nuked half the world to destroy the polar bears, so there's probably a couple plants that need to be replaced. But also, as they're colonizing the galaxy, this seed vault here can be used to bring Earth's plants and food, that people can eat to other planets around the galaxy. Wow, look at this beautiful alien world we discovered. I wonder what incredible flora and fauna it has. I want it full of corn. You make a fantastic point there. Call the seed vault, Gerard. Hello, I need corn delivered to my location right now. Corn being delivered in 3 to 5 seconds. Did she say seconds? Oh my god, the corn's already here. So now we know why Super Earth itself is the way it is, but how did they expand into the galaxy? Well, after all this war, everyone sat down and focused on expanding into other planets because, they kind of messed up half of Earth with the giant war. And that led to the year 2084, where the first galactic war started. Now, humanity's interactions with interstellar species were peaceful at first, but it didn't stay that way for long. First, humanity ran into the bugs, a large sentient race of, bugs that was thriving throughout the galaxy. At first, the bugs had no quarrel with the humans. They didn't see them as a threat. They were small, puny creatures. They looked to be there just to gather resources for themselves, which was not necessarily the same resources the bugs needed, so they figured they could coexist. However, humanity said, we need these planets that the bugs are on all for ourselves. We couldn't possibly share this. And they started trying to wipe them out. Next, humanity ran into the Illuminate, who were a very peaceful race of aliens that were far advanced to humanity as far as technology goes. Their technology almost seemed like magic compared to what the humans could do. And again, humanity initially coexisted with them and tried to make peace offerings, but as soon as humanity found, as they claim, weapons of mass destruction hidden on Illuminate planets, they decided, you know what, we gotta wipe them out. Which I've never exactly heard that justification for a war before. Oh wait. And finally, we had the Cyborgs, who were an interesting enemy from the First Galactic War. The Cyborgs were not an alien species. They were humans themselves that were living on Cyberstan, but it was such a harsh mining world that they started to augment themselves mechanically to be able to survive the tough mining environment. Now again, initially, humanity and the Cyborgs had no quarrel because they started out as the same group, humans. But eventually, Super Earth started to see the Cyborgs as a bit of a threat. Maybe they're getting too technologically advanced. And it was said that the Cyborgs of Cyberstan staged a bombing on Super Earth that killed thousands, and Super Earth needed to go to war with them. Now, I'm not questioning the Super Earth government here, but it's a pretty convenient thing there. I'm wondering if Super Earth kind of might have set up that bombing. I'm just saying. But for Super Earth, the First Galactic War turned out phenomenally. They pushed the bugs back to their home planet of Kepler Prime, and they were able to capture them and start using them to farm oil, because they found that as their carcasses decayed and they squished them real good, oil came out that they could use for fuel. Humanity was able to push back the Illuminate and disarm them of their weapons of mass destruction. And it's said that they were pushed back to corners of the galaxy and almost totally wiped out and left completely unarmed. And finally, the Cyborg Rebellion from Cyberstan was put down, and all the Cyborgs were subjugated back to Cyberstan to resume their mining activities under the watchful eye of the Super Earth government. Now, there is no possible way any of these enemies could have ever come back to threaten Super Earth again. Everyone's back. Okay, Second Galactic War starting now. After 100 years, things started to get spicy again in the galaxy. In the year 2184, the enemies of Super Earth were back. The bugs were back, stronger and fiercer than ever, because they had escaped their farming facilities where they were being squeezed for oil after, some genetic experiments by humanity that made them, more vicious. The Cyborgs themselves are not back, but it looks like they have built an army of complete automatons, see what I did there, to fight Super Earth on their behalf. And the Illuminate are not officially back yet, but there's been little hints in the game. They actually released them on the map for a little bit. There's leaked models and stuff, and they look like they're going to be back fiercer than ever whenever they are added to the game. Now, since this video is about Super Earth and not about the enemies of Super Earth, which if you are interested in learning about, I have covered in other videos on my channel that I'd love if you checked out, I'm not going to bother rehashing them here and waste your time. Instead, we have one last important thing to cover. How is Super Earth structured? How's their government structured? How's their military structured? Let's dig into that real quick. Let's start with the part everyone knows and loves, the Super Earth Armed Forces, or SEAF. First up, we've got the Super Earth Infantry Forces, who do everything to help support the war efforts. They manage the artillery sites, they're the engineers that build the buildings, they're the medics that help everyone out, they perform the logistics to keep everyone supplied. They don't get the glitz and glam the Helldivers do, but they're what truly keeps Super Earth running and controlling the galaxy. You have the Super Earth Navy, who commands all the spaceships they use to travel around the galaxy. You even have the Colonial Guard Forces, which are essentially military police. And of course, to round everything out, we have the legendary Helldivers that we know and love. And let's dig into those Helldivers a little more, because they're who we know and love. If you completed your Helldivers training, you know it was done on Mars. And it said up to 48,000 Helldivers are going to be trained every single day on Mars. And after their training is complete, they're cryogenically frozen and saved for when they're needed in battle. But not all Helldivers are frozen. Some of the legendary Helldivers, as well as top recruits, are kept in unfrozen state whether there's an emergency that breaks out, or, you know, they need to walk in a parade and such. But let's talk about the first time the Helldivers were actually used in battle. It's said the Helldivers were first used in battle at North Man's Creek. There was a small uprising there against the government of Super Earth, and the Helldivers were sent to put it down. They did this by coming crashing down straight through the building that they were taking over with only 50 Helldivers, and this is where it's said was the first use of the Hell Pod as well. But the military is not the only part of the Super Earth government, even though it sure seems like it at times. You have your democratically elected president that may or may not be a cabal of Illuminate that's actually running the Super Earth government, but that's a theory for another day. And we have a couple other non-military based government agencies. You've got the Ministry of Truth, who's essentially the propaganda machine for Super Earth. They create all the training videos, they run all the news channels, they tell people of Super Earth everything they need to know and nothing more. We have one final government agency to talk about here, the Department of Heroic Sacrifice Affairs. This department is in charge of returning, you know, what's left of Helldivers to their families after they are bravely sacrificed in battle. Now, we don't know much about this group, but we do have a form letter that I am going to read for you because it's hilarious. Memo subject, Helldiver name, from Department of Heroic Sacrifice Affairs to partner, close relative, pet neighbor. It is with patriotic pride we inform you that Helldiver name was deployed in the major order to destroy the Terminid supercolony of Meridia. They fought valiantly for liberty and sacrificed themselves in a heroic act of bravery, friendly fire, unavoidable spaghettification. Their actions will surely reverberate throughout the galaxy and strike fear, alarm, mild concern into the cruel hearts of our enemies. As a token of our gratitude for their inspiring commitment to spreading managed democracy, we have waived the customary corpse helmet limb return transportation fee. Yours democratically, Department of Heroic Sacrifice Affairs, Ministry of Defense. So yeah, unsurprisingly, this ministry is not run with a lot of love, we'll say. Whew, alright, that was a whole pile of lore to digest right there. But if you made it to this point in the video, I want to say a massive thank you for watching my content. This video is a long time coming, and is a compilation of the last 6 months of my work making Helldivers content. So if you enjoyed this, I'd love you to have a like down below and consider hitting that subscribe button, because it really helps support me to continue making videos like this. And if you're looking for more, don't worry, I'll be making plenty more. But as of right now, I currently have other smaller Helldivers videos on my channel, like about the Railgun or General Brash, and I'd love you to check them out. Thanks, and I'll see you guys next time.